Do you have space for your creativity? Huh? Well, hey there. Welcome back. Are you a creative? Yes. Do you have space for your creativity? Huh? Wait, Mark, I thought life is made of three things: time, energy, and resources. None of those things are space. So, is life made of four things? No. Silly. Let's back up a little bit. As you may or may not have heard or learned from one of my books, that a lot of times when people are thinking they don't have the time for something, they actually don't have the energy for it. I was coaching someone about writing a book, and they had more than enough time. In fact, they had a huge amount of time because their job basically ended and they didn't take it home with them. But they just sort of collapsed into a big heap of goo and watched sort of mindless television for hours on end. And it was because they were out of energy. Because of their job and the way the job made them feel, they were drained of any energy, so they couldn't be creative. Backing up again, when I say, are you a creative? And I immediately answer yes, many times I have said, everyone is a creative. And you may disagree with that. If you have a job in which you think you're just doing something that's relatively linear and doesn't require any creativity, and you might even say, Mark, it's about me doing the job well. It's not about me being creative, because creative is bad in this job. We have a certain way to do it. Well, okay. Even if your job forces you into bookends of performing a task a certain way, you have the rest of your life, everything else, to be creative. And whether it's the way you keep your house looking, it's the way that you maybe approach a hobby, it's the way that you work out, it's the way you treat your family and your kids, it's the way you cook. I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be your job. So everyone is creative. I might even submit to you that if you think your job has no room for creativity, you may find that it does. And it's that looking around for creativity and sort of adjusting for a creativity that sets you apart from people. Now, I don't want you to get fired. I don't want you to come to blows with your boss because you're being all creative on this. And, Rick, we just need you to do this way. We have a policy and procedure for you to do it this way. We're going to get in trouble with the FCC or what have you. You just need to do it this way. It's not what I'm talking about. But let's just both agree that everything is creative. And everyone is creative. Well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing. I appreciate that. So what do I mean by creative space? Well, in one of my earlier podcasts, I talked about multitasking, and I talked about how your energy was the glue that held multitasking together, and how multitasking is kind of a lie. That there are only certain kinds of things you can multitask in my opinion, and they have to use two different brain systems. It's why you can empty the dishwasher and have a meaningful conversation. And it's why you can't help your kids with their homework and also do your taxes at the same time. And every time you switch from one thing to another, even if it's every few seconds or minutes, you're using extra energy. So again, you can take a look at that podcast or listen. It's linked in the article that goes along with this. The reason I bring that up is because that's what sort of creates your space. If you say, I have this project that I want to do for about an hour. Okay, so you're marking off about an hour in time. Look on your schedule today because you have some flexibility and you say, I easily have an hour, I can do this today. And you just start working on it at 10 a.m. And every so often you kind of look up to see if you have an email, or you get a phone call, or you get an email. And you go, and you have to stop real quick. Oh, I'll just put that on hold. And then you tend to the email, or you talk to the client, or you talk to whomever is on the phone, and then you jump back into what you're doing. You don't have a space. You have time that you're now mincing up, but you don't have a space. However, if you say at 7 p.m. today, I'm going to work on this for an hour. So you're done with work, you're done with dinner, you're done with family stuff, and you say 7 to 8. And you know in the back of your head that nothing's going to happen at 8. Or 9. It's really about how tired you're going to get. So really you have an open end at the end of this. So you actually have like 2 hours. Then you do have a space. You do have creative space. You have work space. You have productivity space. You see how that would apply to even alone time would become alone space? It probably is even more clear if you said, I'm going to meditate for 15 minutes. Or I'll just meditate until the phone rings. Which one sounds more like you're actually going to be able to meditate? So you see the importance of space versus time. And it's not necessarily the space that we think of when we think of space and outer space and the physical universe. It's almost a metaphysical, time and energy based thing. That's the space I'm talking about. You might even call it breathing room. I just need some breathing room. And you may have talked about it, and you may be painfully aware of what this thing is, but you didn't really give it a name. It's kind of why some people used to say, oh, I'm going to write a novel. I'm going to go up north to a cabin and I'm just going to write. What are they talking about? I mean, they're talking about a physical space, but they're also talking about a space that's marked out in time and energy that says, well, yeah, no one's going to bother me here. I can actually do that. And not having that is kind of what builds up stress. So if you're building a lot of stress in your life, it's probably because you don't have a lot of space. You don't have a lot of space for creativity, productivity, alone time, peace, or to be yourself. So how much space do you have in your life? You can think about that after this podcast, or you can pause like we do sometimes here because we're cool and clever and hip and trendy, and pause it right now, and then we'll continue. Thank you. So if you've thought about having this space in your life, or the fact that you don't have any, and it may make you realize, well, yeah, that's why I'm stressed. I am stressed because I have a lot of obligations and things that overlap. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what you could be thinking, is that you have all these things that overlap and you're forced to multitask, and you're forced to have a completely disruptive schedule that just makes it so that you can't have any space at all. You may find that you have done something kind of unusual and yet logical. You may have created spaces in some of the most volatile and unhealthy environments because it was a guarantee. The more volatile of an environment, the more distasteful, volatile, unlikable, uninhabitable of an environment, the less likely that space is going to be infringed by something. Are you more likely to get calls from your kids if you are a accountant or a firefighter, salesperson or matador, draftsman or deep sea diver? The latter in all those cases have to carve out a definitive space, because it's very much to their detriment to just stop what they're doing and take a phone call. And people recognize that. So you may have a number of overlapping spaces, whether it's external things like your kids or your spouse calling you, or internal things like you have things on your mind in which you're trying to balance your budget, or deal with a money issue, or deal with a relationship issue, or maybe you're having an issue at your job and thinking of going elsewhere. And those things are overlapping and they're messing up your space. In a near perfect world, we would probably have a few spaces, and then we'd have some buffering between those spaces in which you'd switch between your intense focus on your project or your job, and then you'd switch to family, and then you'd switch to hobbies and so forth. And then maybe there'd be some overlap with some of those, and there might be some disruption to keep things a little interesting. But that's not really how life works. But, I don't think that's a thing, but an even bigger but, that doesn't sound good either. Also, you don't have to have as much disruption of your space as you have right now. And maybe you don't. Maybe you live in this near perfect world, and I applaud you, but most people don't. Most people have allowed their spaces to sort of encroach on each other, and that's what they then call multitasking, which is really just this intense stress that keeps multiplying and multiplying. So what's the magic secret formula for this? Well, I could tell you that, but let's be more realistic right now. Just the awareness, like we always have in these podcasts. Awareness first, and then problem solving second. So again, think about your schedule. Think about the things that are meaningful to you. Think about the things that you may not be able to accomplish that you think, man, I got all the time in the world, or why didn't I do that again? Or you look back on a weekend, you go, oh, this is the weekend I was going to do that thing, and I think I wanted to do that thing. This is exactly what comes up in the coaching all the time when we map things out. We get to see it visually, which is redundant, but we get to see visually how this all works and why something might be encroaching on something. And sometimes it takes the simplest of efforts to take two things and push them apart. And not just push them apart as this happens at 9, this happens at 11, but the approach of how you treat these things keeps their spaces apart. I hope that made sense. I had fun. I hope you did too. And see you again.
Living life every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.
Do you have a story to share or a question? If your idea makes it to a podcast, you will receive a shout out as well as a token of my appreciation. Join the community, patreon.com/Alchemy for Life.
All I need are some better days.